India's qualification campaign for the AFC Asian Cup 2023, or whenever it will be held, got off to the best and most perfect start as they started off with a 2-0 win over Cambodia. But now they will need to continue the momentum, and ahead of today's match against Afghanistan, we are going to actually check out a few things. We're going to talk about the last game. We're going to talk about India's record against Afghanistan and what it is that India could and should be doing if they are to not only take a step closer to qualification but potentially to topping the group as well. Remember, the equation is such that from the teams in the 6 groups, the 6 group toppers are guaranteed to go through, but only 5 of the 6 teams that finish second will make it into the AFC Asian Cup. Now, obviously, India would want, given that this is a group that's relatively easy for them, at least on paper, they want to top the group, go through easily, no fuss, no even a slight worry about the fact that they could be that one team who finishes second that misses out. No, forget that, finish first, and in theory, that's it. You're through to the tournament and no headaches whatsoever. Thankfully, for India's case, as I said, it's a pretty easy group, and a quick look at their head-to-head record against Afghanistan makes that seem like an even easier task, at least on paper. Remember, India have played a total of 15 matches against Afghanistan in history, and they've only gone and not won 6 of those matches. In fact, only one of those matches has ended up in win for Afghanistan. So that itself tells you just how dominant and one-sided this head-to-head record is. India have won 9 of those matches. Perhaps the more concerning thing is that the last time these two teams actually faced off, the teams ended up playing out a 1-1 draw, but it's also worth noting that this happened all the way back in 2012. So it's a whole different team and a whole different ethos, a whole different style of play. So India shouldn't be too bogged down by that particular result. What's more, in those 15 games, India have scored 43 goals. That's an average of a little over 2 goals per game. And that coincidentally is exactly the number of goals they scored against Cambodia last time around. So for India, the task is simple. You beat Afghanistan, whether it be 1-0, 2-0 or 5-0, and you're one step closer to not only qualification, but you're also a step closer to sealing that top spot, which of course, as we know, is important not only because of course you're finishing top of your group, but because it guarantees you a spot in the AFC Asian Cup. Now, after last match's game, I had spoken very clearly about certain concerns that India had, and probably one of the bigger concerns was, and this has been something of a concern throughout Igor Stimacz's reign as head coach, is that India, for all their dominance of possession, don't often end up converting a lot of those chances. Now, that is something that happened again in the last game. There were plenty of possession that they had, but at times Cambodia were content to just sit back and absorb the pressure, knowing full well that India lacked, more often than not, a good killer pass, or when they got the killer pass, they lacked a killer instinct up front. Of course, that can't be said about the man in front here, Sunil Chhetri. He scored 2 goals, looked in very fine form, but he also did get a little frustrated at one point, ended up picking up a booking, which is why he was hooked off before he had a chance to complete his hat-trick. For Stimac, the main priority was to preserve the captain and main goal scorer. And obviously, with India's goal scorers, the likes of Udanta can be very dangerous going forward. The likes of course, even Sahal Abdul Samad from midfield can be very dangerous going forward. The major issue for the Indians is that they haven't quite been able to translate, at least for a lot of these players, they've not necessarily always been able to translate club form onto the international stage. Now that's something that obviously the team will need them to do, because, well, quite simply speaking, it's not good enough just performing for your club. At the end of the day, if you want international glory, you need to be performing when the stage or when the lights are at its brightest, and that's oftentimes in the international game. Now, of course, that can't be said for everyone. Liston Kolako in the last game was pretty active, but again, didn't really get on the end of enough chances. But within the Indians, the problem is not the fact that they don't have talent. They have talent. It's more often than not about formulating a cohesive game plan and of taking their chances when they arise. Thankfully, this isn't too tough a task in terms of you're not beating or not going up against a team that is a much bigger heavyweight or someone that has a tendency of hurting India in the past. Afghanistan in that regard is probably one of the easier fixtures that India could be having in this particular group. So it is of course in their best interest that they just win and therefore take away the headache of actually needing a result in the final game, which would potentially ramp up the pressure. But as I said, for India, all they need to do is just repeat the kind of performance that they had against Cambodia. Was it the prettiest performance? No, definitely not. There were definitely sticking points, but it doesn't matter how pretty you play as long as you play effectively. And for India, the main goal at this point would be to do whatever it is possible to ensure that they are on the flight for the AFC Asian Cup when it does happen. It will be a big deal, of course, because this team is something of a team in transition. There are a lot of veterans, there's a lot of youngsters coming in, but I think perhaps one of the major things that this Indian team will want to do is to ensure that someone like Sunil Chhetri, who's been such a wonderful servant to Indian football, gets to sign off on a high and put in a few good performances at the continental level. It's pretty evident that India are nowhere near making a World Cup, but they're still good enough to be making the Asia Cup. And if the skipper can have one good showing on the stage that big, it would be truly befitting for a man of his stature. Remember, he's really up and abouts there when it comes to international goal scoring, absolute beast of international football, and it would be best that he gets to shine on a stage that big one last time, because as we know, even before this tournament he was talking about, I'm in my final days of playing, although he still hasn't confirmed his retirement. Well, he's 37 years old. I don't think it'll be that far away, but the main focus for him and for everyone else will be simple: qualify for the AFC Asian Cup and put any noise around anything which is going on in Indian football. We know that there's a lot going on. The AIFF is currently being overseen by a committee of administrators. India's status in international football, at least for now, is a little uncertain because there are talks that there could be a temporary FIFA ban. Forget about all of that. Go out there, perform, win, and that's the best thing that you can do for your fans and for your country. Hopefully they will be able to do just that. Either which way, I will be joining you guys live after the match is done to discuss how well or how badly things go, depending on what the match ends like. So thank you all for joining us. If you enjoy what it is that we do, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, leave us a comment below telling us what you feel about this match. Are you nervous, excited, scared, mixture of all of the above? Let us know. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and do stay tuned. We are on across platforms. Don't forget to find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. We're everywhere, and you'll see our videos everywhere as well. Thank you again for joining us as always.